Hi, I'm Scott Ottom with Bill Whittle here live in Dallas, Texas, the center of the universe. And Stephen Green joins us from Monument, Colorado for your right angle today. And I'm actually going to do something a little bit different than we've previously done. Number one, I'm going to wear my spectacles. But number two, I'd just like to share with you some of my favorite headlines of the last couple of weeks. And the first couple of them are from the Washington Post. Rex Tillerson is afraid of the media. That was on March 10th. Rex Tillerson is off to an agonizingly slow start. That was on March 9th. Rex Tillerson skips State Department's annual announcement on human rights, alarming advocates. That was on the 3rd. Where in the world is Secretary of State Tillerson? That was on the 1st. New York Times says, where is Rex Tillerson? Top envoy keeps head down and travels light. Tillerson leads from State Department shadows as White House steps in. Why is Mr. Tillerson in a perpetual state of duck and cover? These were all from the New York Times and Washington Post alone. I won't even get into the HuffPo and CNN. But in essence, they all come together in what Rachel Maddow's headline says, State Department has disappeared under Tillerson.
Oh, we can only hope.
Gentlemen, I'm really concerned because I remember a time, and I would hate to see us go back to this time, when the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, was alone in the office with like one or two other people on the whole staff, and nobody knew what they were doing day to day. There was not a whole contingent of media constantly asking them questions. How can we know what's happening in the world if Rex Tillerson won't stand in front of a microphone? Bill?
Do you know what that reminded me of? It was during the 1988 Democratic National keynote speech, and it was during the DNC in 1988, and it was George Bush Sr. versus Michael Dukakis, and they were basically saying, when something and something happened, where was George? You know, was something.
Oh, they were chanting it. That's right, in their call and response.
And somebody said, he was at home, warm in bed with his wife. It was Kennedy. I'm sorry, I killed the whole joke. It was Ted. Really? It was Ted Kennedy. Yeah. Yes, he's at home, warm in bed with his wife. That's where he was, and that's what I want to say when I hear this. Where's Rex Tillerson? Maybe he's working. Who knows? Maybe he's working instead of doing press conferences. Maybe he's on the telephone.
But Bill, you would be the first one to admit that the whole nature of government has changed with the advent of mass media, especially visual, moving picture media, and to be able to say, look, can you really be the Secretary of State if you're not out there in front of the cameras all the time?
Well, first of all, I don't think this internet thing's going to catch on. But even if it does.
It's bad.
It's true you have to have a public presence these days, but the president has to have one, and he's got a press secretary who has to do most of the heavy lifting there. They're saying that Rex Tillerson is off to a slow start. I mean, John Kerry was off to a slow start when he left office. Even 4 years in office. John Kerry, by the way, if you want to talk about telegenetics and just general overall appearances,
Well,
John, no. I mean, I'm sorry. I just have to say it. The former Secretary of State looked like, he looked like Fred Munster, who'd been out in the sun like way too long. And
at least he cared enough to get a little work done.
Did he? He had some work done? I'm shocked to hear it.
Nothing.
No, so this is kind of it, right?
I mean,
Tillerson is a real looking guy. He hasn't had all of this Botox and all of this work done. He doesn't look lifelike because he's a human being, and he looks like the Secretary of State. He's got the Silver Temple thing going. I think he's probably working, and I don't think you need to run the government by basically kissing the butt of the press over every single thing every single day.
But Stephen Green, when you talk about accountability to the American people, how do we know what the guy is even doing if he's constantly behind closed doors? I mean, the guy shows up in Europe, goes to the G20 summit, I think, talks to some people at NATO behind closed doors, gets out in front of the media, and during the entire time he was in Europe, he spoke no more than 50 words in response to press questions. When he flew to Asia, and I don't know if they've resolved this before the flight actually took off, basically they were saying, hey, if the press wants to cover the Secretary of State's trip to Asia, they're welcome to do so. You can call, you can go to the Expedia.com and book yourself a flight, but they weren't planning to bring the media along on the trip. So what I ask you, Steve, is how can we hold our public officials accountable if we're not hearing from a free and independent press about their daily goings-on at the State Department?
Oh, yeah, our free and independent press that requires to be spoon-fed its information. Like we had what's his name from the Obama administration saying the thing about reporters is they're all 27 years old and they don't know anything. The only thing any of them have done before going to Washington was hang around campaigns. These were the actual words of a of an Obama administration operative. And so the press, instead of actually doing the work of the shoe leather work, the phone call work of actual journalism, they just want to go to the press conference and be spoon-fed the stuff that they can spin either this way or that. So here's a suggestion, fellas. Do your damn job. You know, there are only three kinds of secretaries of state. I think you've got the ones who are in it for personal aggrandizement, like John Kerry or Colin Powell. You've got the ones who are in it for personal enrichment, like Hillary Clinton, and you've got people who are going to try and get some work done, like George Shultz and hopefully Rex Tillerson. That doesn't require a whole lot of time in the limelight. Although, you know, I have it on good authority that Tillerson is actually engaged in some very energetic shuttle diplomacy between Berlin and Moscow. He's trying to negotiate the restoration of East Germany and then give it back to the Russians.
Has anyone coined the term journalizard before?
I think we should.
No,
right
I
here.
got it
Copyright Bill Whittle,
Thank you.
2017. The counter narrative to this, of course, is not that Rex Tillerson is hiding because he's incompetent and he doesn't want to stand in front of the media because he's afraid he'll get a tough question that he doesn't know how to answer. But in fact, he's been told to sit down and shut up, that he's being marginalized by the White House, that he's being excluded from important meetings, that he's not being invited in. Now, we saw this happen in Lyndon Johnson's administration, essentially where Johnson was meeting with his Secretary of Defense, but keeping the Joint Chiefs of Staff at arm's length. Bill, what if that's the case? What if we have a Secretary of State, Trump picks a highly competent guy running one of the biggest companies in the world and basically tells him, we don't need your help with this whole diplomacy business?
You know, Tillerson's not that kind of guy, and you could say, well, maybe it was a one-off mistake. But I mean, this is when my belief in Donald Trump and my comfort with him went very, very much higher. If Donald Trump's that kind of a guy, then you don't put Mad Dog Mattis in as Secretary of Defense. You find some political general or some senator or something who has an okay, national security voting record, and you make him Secretary of Defense, and he just bows down and does whatever the boss tells him. And the same thing with DeVos, and the same thing with all of his appointees.
H.R. McMaster.
H.R. McMaster.
No wimp there.
No, exactly right.
That's another good one. Yeah.
Exactly right. So it certainly would have been possible for him to appoint essentially a bunch of nothing burgers who were just going to, take orders from the boss. But on the contrary, he has picked the most willful, determined, bold, actual leaders that he seems to have found. Now, this was the hope about Trump going into the election and his presidency. Would he run the country like he runs his many businesses? In other words, Donald Trump's not going to be checking you in at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. He's going to hire the best manager he can for that resort and casino, and if they do well, they stay. If they don't, they go. And he sits on top of the empire, basically, and makes sure that all the wheels are spinning. And this is exactly what the federal government needs. It needs a person who knows how to manage, delegate, and all the rest of it. We remember Obama said, I'm a better speechwriter than my speechwriters. I know more about foreign policy than my foreign policy advisors. Well, turns out he did.
Bill, let me add on to what you were saying there, Scott, if you don't mind me taking over your show for just a second.
Take it away, baby.
When Tillerson was given the nod to become Secretary of State, he didn't find out like Obama always did from reading the news. No, there are always negotiations before the name is announced. So the president says, I'm thinking about naming you my Secretary of State. What do you think about that? And he says, well, if I'm going to be your Secretary of State, these are the things that I would like to accomplish on my watch. And they come to an understanding before the name is made public. When Trump failed to do this with the guy he put up before H.R. McMaster, was all over the press because the negotiations weren't handled privately, and the guy bailed, said, "You don't want to let me do this and this and this? I'm out of here," before his name could even be put up. So that's how these things are typically handled. You better believe a guy like Rex Tillerson didn't take the job unless he knew beforehand exactly what his agenda was going to be or could be.
Well, I think Stephen Green nailed it. When it comes to information, those of us who are concerned about the liberty of a free people and a free and independent press, and maybe we're not getting all the news we should be getting, we're not holding our public officials accountable. Steve used the word spoon feeding, and that's absolutely what these press appearances are. It is not just, coming out there and getting the whole story out there. It is the reporters sitting there hoping to take a cheap shot, And it's this, frankly, it is the government official trying to spin the information to make them look best. And I think Rex Tillerson, and this is the best possible spin I can put on it, Rex Tillerson has made the decision that he wants to be a competent manager here. And he's learned over the years that a competent manager isn't necessarily like, John Legere, or however you pronounce his name, who is the CEO of T-Mobile, who's constantly tweeting and making big public announcements. Good managers over the years, if you look at great companies, tend not to be those sensational characters who are constantly in front of the cameras. They tend to be the guys whose feet are under their desks, or they're meeting with people privately, and they are getting stuff done rather than talking about getting stuff done. At this point, that's the takeaway that I get from this, and I'm just going to give Rex Tillerson credit for what he's already done in his life and assume that he knows enough about good leadership and management to be able to do the same thing at the Department of State. With Bill Whittle in Dallas and Stephen Green in Monument, Colorado, this has been Right Angle. I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for your support at BillWhittle.com.
You're really much better off the teleprompter, Scotty.
Really?
Yeah, much better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I thought it sucked.